we'll start with this. This past weekend, reigning WBO bantamweight champion Dina Thorslund was in action in what was yet another successful defense of her WBO title, and she's targeting an Ebony Bridges unification match. WBO bantamweight title holder Dina Thorslund is pushing for huge unification fights with Ebony Bridges and the other champions. The 28-year-old will now start beating the drum for clashes with Bridges, Jamie Mitchell, and Kinahan Luna.
After she came through a defense of her title in Denmark this past Saturday.
Bridges won the IBF title last month, but the unbeaten Thorslund believes she would be too strong for the Australian and anyone else in the bantamweight division. Thorslund dominated Yorkis Carreno in Holtzborough this past weekend, and now the Danes' focus will immediately turn to unification fights. It would be amazing to fight Ebony, but the result would not come as a surprise to people, because I would win because I am better than her, Thorslund said. But it would be a great fight, and the build-up could be real fun with two blonde bombers. I believe I am the strongest fighter at bantamweight, and with the right preparation, I can take all of the belts and unify this division, she added. That is my goal, and to get to this point in my career has been a long time coming, especially with no promoter for so long, but with Probellum backing me. I hope we can make these massive unification matches. I will say that perhaps Probellum can help Dina Thorslund get a Kinahan Luna in the ring.
I don't think they're going to have that same luck with either Jamie Mitchell or Ebony Bridges.
Those two fighters are tied to Matchroom.
There are very few fighters at this weight I think stand a chance against Dina Thorslund.
And it's not because Jamie and Ebony aren't good fighters. They're good fighters. They're all good fighters. But Dina Thorslund isn't just a good fighter, and she's not just a champion. She's a two-division champion, an experienced champion with more pro fights than both of them, than both Jamie and Ebony.
More experienced than both.
Faster than both.
Dangerous.
The reigns of both Jamie Mitchell and Ebony Bridges would be under certain peril should they ever find themselves opposite the ring, Dina Thorslund. The only titleist at this weight that I think stands a chance against Dina is an equally experienced fighter to Dina in Mexico's own Kinahan Luna.
Kinahan, who was very recently in action against her countrywoman, then unbeaten Mayeli Flores.
Now, let me tell you something. Even Mayeli Flores would be a grave threat to the reigns of either Jamie Mitchell or Ebony Bridges as champions. That's right. Even a fighter like Mayeli Flores would be a serious and grave threat to those young champions in their young reigns as champions.
I don't mean young in terms of age.
Young in the sense that they haven't been champions very long. Ebony Bridges won the IBF title in her very last fight. Jamie Mitchell, she became WBA champion not but 2 fights ago.
Neither one of them have been champions very long.
Whereas Dina Thorslund, she's a 2-division champion, having reigned as a WBO champion at super bantamweight. Currently, bantamweight, that's 122 and 118 pounds. Kinahan Luna,
She's a 2-division champion. She held the IBF title at super bantamweight.
won that title back in 2014, had a couple of fights, eventually saw herself moving down in weight. 2020, unseated long-reigning WBC bantamweight champion of Mexico, Bobby Juarez. Both Dina Thorslund and Kinahan Luna, 2-division champions, having been champions at both super bantamweight and currently reigning as champions at bantamweight. The both of them are a lot more experienced than Jamie and Ebony.
Look at the kind of fighters Dina Thorslund's been fighting.
These ain't soccer moms and journeywomen with upside-down records. These are very experienced fighters.
This is a big part of the reason that Dina Thorslund's so confident she'd beat Ebony Bridges and take her blue belt.
The landscape at 118 pounds is beaming with talent in terms of challengers and champions. You can mix and match the names almost any which way and get a great fight as a result. Though the way it actually breaks down, even though Dina and Kinahan Luna are a lot more experienced than Ebony Bridges is the biggest name at this weight and the most recognizable fighter. In that way, she's the A-side fighter to all of them, as she has more marquee value and more of a profile than they do.
That makes her a prime target for the both of them.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown. That's what they say.
Ebony must tread carefully now.
Ebony Bridges is a better fighter than she's often given credit for. A hard worker that's worked hard in the last year or so, a little over a year, to raise her profile in order to raise her marquee value. She understands the business, understands the industry, and in having been so successful in doing so,
these champions that are out there might want to fight with her more than they'd want to fight each other.
because she's got more of a profile than they do. She may not be as experienced, may not be as accomplished as some of these other fighters that are out there. She doesn't have her O intact the way that Jamie Mitchell does. Jamie Mitchell still is an unbeaten fighter, though Ebony...
In many ways, she's the woman to beat at 118 pounds.
I hope she's ready, because they're all going to come for her. In other news, a story that's grabbing a lot of attention, Daniel Kinahan issued sanction by U.S. Treasury as key member of organized crime group. An article from Dake Jonovan, a large portion of the boxing industry has chosen to ignore the criminal history of Daniel Kinahan, even as the controversial figure continues to make inroads into the sport. Government officials aren't as willing to stick their collective heads in the sand. The controversial boxing figure was officially identified by the U.S. Department of Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, as a key member of the Kinahan Organized Crime Group, KOCG. The U.S. government's office announced Monday evening. Kinahan was named among 7 parties, including his father, Christopher Christie Kinahan Sr., who was previously convicted and imprisoned for drug
possession and money laundering.
along with his brother, Christopher Jr.
The last 2 years, Daniel Kinahan has become a person of interest.
A shadowy figure boxing fans and the boxing community has become more and more acquainted with.
Big fucking deal. It's boxing. Everybody's a crook.
On what scale? That's the question. Daniel Kinahan is believed to be the leader of a crime syndicate, a rather large one.
Though he's never been prosecuted for any of the stuff he's been accused of.
And he's been accused of a lot of stuff, but as it stands, he hasn't actually been tried for any of this. Christie Kinahan Sr., who was previously convicted and imprisoned for drug possession and money laundering, brother Christopher Jr., along with 3 affiliated businesses, all against whom the Treasury Department designated and sanctioned for criminal activity. The Kinahan organized crime group smuggles deadly narcotics, including cocaine, into Europe and is a threat to the entire illicit economy through its role in international money laundering, Brian E. Nelson, Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, declared in a statement. Criminal groups like the KOCG prey on the most vulnerable in society and bring drug-related crime and violence, including murder, to the countries in which they operate. Treasury is proud to have coordinated so closely with our international counterparts, and the U.S. government will continue to use every available resource to dismantle these criminal networks. A press conference held in Garda Síochána, Ireland's National Police and Security Service, Tuesday in Dublin, revealed that the U.S. Department of State has placed a $5 million reward for information leading to the financial disruption of KOCG or the arrest and or conviction of Daniel Kinahan, his father, or his brother. Kinahan was identified as overseeing the criminal organization's drug trafficking operations. Although he has never been arrested for any of his alleged criminal activity, the U.S. Treasury Department also tied him to the financial and business management of Dukashu General Trading, LLC, a business consultancy based in Dubai where Kinahan has lived since 2016. None of Kinahan's direct boxing ties were mentioned in Monday's declaration, which focused more on the criminal side and companies with direct links to any of the 7 targets.
So they're offering people $5 million to rat on this guy.
Seems a bit desperate to me, offering up that kind of financial incentive for information. $5 million? You're talking about 5 million big ones.
For tips on this guy, his dad, and his brother.
You're offering $5 million. What that communicates to me is you don't have enough information yourself, not enough to build a case. I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire, that's what they say. Though if they actually had a case, a concrete one, an airtight one, against Daniel Kinahan and his family members, his associates, his cohorts, if they actually had a case, they wouldn't need to offer people $5 million to rat him out.
No, not if they had a case.
If they actually had enough to pin the rap on this guy, his family, and make it stick, they wouldn't need to offer people that kind of money to rat him out.
No, they wouldn't need to, because they'd have what they need.
If they actually had it. Kinahan was a founding member of MTK Global, originally named MGM, Macklin's Gym, Marbella, before taking on a rebranding due to a naming dispute with MGM Grand Resort and Casino. The name was changed in 2017 to MTK, an acronym for Mac the Knife. The nickname of Matthew Macklin, a former middleweight contender and Kinahan's longtime close friend with whom he founded the company. Macklin sold the company in 2017 to Sandra Vaughn, who in a 2020 interview with IFL TV alleged that there are no ties to Daniel Kinahan. There was no contract or financial transaction, absolutely nothing. He hasn't got anything to do with MTK Global. The claim is supported, at least in part, by the U.S. Department of Treasury, who on Monday named just 3 companies directly tied to the 7 key members of the KOCG. Dukashu General Trading, LLC, which is alleged to be owned or controlled by, directly or indirectly, Daniel Kinahan. Daniel Kinahan runs Dukashu through various individuals and is involved in its financial and business management. Yeah, allegedly he is. Hupu Sports, LLC, a Dubai-based sports management advisory company managed by Ian Dixon, who was designated for materially assisting, sponsoring, and providing financial, material, and or technological support or goods or services to or in support of Daniel Kinahan. Nero Drinks Company Limited, a UK-based alcoholic beverage company owned or controlled by, directly or indirectly, John Morrissey, an Irish national based in Spain who was designated for materially assisting, sponsoring, and or providing financial, material, and or technological support for or goods or services to or in support of KOCG.
It doesn't sound like they have much of a case.
Smoking gun, damning evidence, damning audio, damning video that would confirm all of these accusations and allegations being levied against Daniel Kinahan. And I want to make this clear. I am not asserting Daniel's innocence or the innocence of his cohorts and his affiliates. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is if these guys actually had a case,
If they actually had an airtight case against Daniel,
that proves he is who they say he is, who they've been saying he is. If they actually had an airtight case, well, they'd be further along than this. All of this is alleged.
what they're doing is connecting the dots.
That's what it sounds like. They're connecting the dots and attempting to build the case. And they have been at this for some time.
But I'll be honest, they don't seem any closer to pinning the rap on this guy.
They don't seem any closer to pinning the rap on Daniel Kinahan now than they did a year ago or even 2 years ago.
It's all based on belief. It's all alleged.
They have not established that these individuals and their aforementioned companies are in fact laundering money.
No, they haven't established that. They just suspect it.
They suspect that these guys and their companies are up to no good, but they haven't proven that, because if they had, well, they'd have more of a case, and this entire situation, it'd be further along than it actually is. The designation by the Treasury Department means that all properties and parties in the United States must be blocked and reported to the OFAC. The intention of the sanctions in place are intended to bring about a positive change of behavior and are not meant to be permanent, though entirely dependent on designated parties cleaning up their act. It does put Kinahan under a microscope should he attempt to do business of any kind in the United States, boxing or otherwise. Several athletes, promoters, and even media outlets have direct ties with Kinahan, though such relationships figure to drastically change in the wake of actions taken by the Treasury. In layman's terms, the heat is on, it is. They're trying to put that guy under a microscope, but here's the kicker.
You can try to block Daniel from doing business in the United States, but he doesn't do business in the United States.
He's based out of Dubai, and if the proverbial reach of his crime syndicate can somehow reach to the United States, it's likely through other guys and through other companies. I mean, you can sanction these aforementioned companies, but what stops him from starting up new ones?
Nothing.
That'll keep these guys connecting dots for more weeks and months at a time. What they're trying to do is make Daniel and his buddies hot potatoes, guys that you don't want to do business with openly. The thing is that I'd wager most guys that do business with Daniel and his buddies, they don't do business with them openly anyway.
They're just trying to make it harder for Daniel to do business.
Assuming he's doing anything illegal, because these sanctions aren't exactly proof of that.
Hey, what's all of this got to do with boxing?
This is all very theatrical, all very law and order, but we do know that Daniel Kinahan, among his many endeavors, he does have a hand in the careers of several boxers he has been pictured with. In reference to that, Raith Al-Samaidi.
Is that how you pronounce it?
I don't know. Raith stated, "I've spoken to Bob Arum," in reference to Daniel Kinahan and just everything that's going on. And Bob says,
We're not gonna deal with Daniel. We respect the sanctions. We will deal directly with Tyson Fury or his lawyer. I wasn't pleased with the number of things Daniel Kinahan was doing in boxing. I was looking to sever ties anyway.
on the face of it, what these sanctions hope to do is make things a little bit more difficult for Daniel Kinahan and his cohorts to do business internationally, by making Daniel a bit of a social pariah, someone you don't want to do business with openly unless you want to get scrutinized as much as he's getting scrutinized, unless your business practices...
You don't want to do business with this guy openly unless you want to end up under a microscope.
The OFAC's microscope. As all of this pertains to boxing, you'll notice that neither MTK Global or Probellum were among the aforementioned companies the OFAC is sanctioning.
A lot of people still feel Daniel Kinahan's the guy behind MTK.
Even though Sarah Vaughn herself stated that Daniel Kinahan's not in the picture, not with MTK, not anymore. You'll notice that, and you'll notice that Probellum, the fledgling managerial and promotional company, a company that many people feel is actually being helmed, not by Richard Schaefer,
Not him.
but by Daniel Kinahan.
They didn't mention them either.
There are no sanctions being levied against either MTK Global or Probellum.
So as all of this pertains to boxing,
Well, it doesn't actually pertain to boxing. It has no tangible effect on the boxing world. The world of boxing that many people feel Daniel Kinahan has, in fact, infiltrated, working with several familiar faces, familiar fighters. As it stands, there's no sanctions levied against MTK or Probellum.
that doesn't mean the heat isn't on.
And that don't mean those outfits can't end up under a microscope. They might in the future, but as it stands, those companies, they're not the ones that have sanctions levied against them.
So as this pertains to boxing, it doesn't actually pertain to boxing.
For those that may have needed this bit of information deciphered in order to understand what's going on, the OFAC is trying to make it a little harder for Daniel to do business on U.S. soil.
Trying to limit the reach of his crime syndicate.
His alleged crime syndicate, I should say, since none of this is a smoking gun, none of this is proof of foul play, these sanctions.
So if you're wondering why Bob is disassociating himself with Daniel,
Openly and publicly, I should say, it's because he don't want to end up under a microscope for doing business with that guy.
Yeah, you don't want John Law sticking his big nose in his business.
And nobody does, really. Nobody wants to be brought in for questioning.
which is completely understandable.